Hello everyone, my name is Brendan Snyder and thank you for joining me. With 2019 coming to a close here, I thought we'd take a look back at the best albums of the year, the ones that came out during 2019. Now there is literally hundreds upon hundreds of really great records that came out this year. This was really hard distilling this down, but I narrowed this down to 30 albums that I think are the best ones that came out this year, and that's what we're going to run through here. So first up, we've got a re-release of Paul McCartney's Egypt Station that came out. It does have the standard edition of the album, the 16 tracks that included the 2 bonus tracks from the different versions of that time, so from the 14 up to the 16 on that. But you get a bonus disc in this one that's got 6 additional studio songs that were recorded during the sessions, as well as 4 live tracks. So you get a bonus disc of 10 tracks on this. It's totally worth checking out for a second time just for that bonus disc that's in there. Keeping on the Beatles theme, Ringo Starr made a new record called Ringo. This is a really great album on here. He's got a lot of cool guest players. He's got Joe Walsh doing a duet with him on it, also playing lead guitar. He's got Steve Lukather of Toto on here. He's got Colin Hay of Men at Work. He's got a really great song on here called What's My Name, with this call and response where he shouts out what's my name and you hear the audience yell it back to him. I think it's gonna be an amazing song done live. If you like Ringo and you like what he does and his all-star band, this is really good stuff. Do check that out. Now the next album here is one that the Beatles fans were highly anticipating. It's the remastered edition of Abbey Road. This one here, the deluxe edition, comes with a bonus disc of alternate takes for the album. But what really got me about this was the remix that's done by George Martin's son of the album itself. I think that it really enhanced the album, it livened it up. And if you've got the original album, keep that, because this thing here is the remixed album along with the alternates as the second album. So this here would be in addition to the original Abbey Road album. But really good stuff, check that out. Final thing wrapping up our Beatles theme beginning here is this, the Claypool Lennon Delirium, which has Les Claypool of Primus and Sean Lennon, John Lennon's son, in here. And if you like what Les Claypool does in Primus, those heavy bass riffing that he does, and the psychedelic stuff that Sean Lennon is known for, the mashup of these two things is really great. I wasn't expecting it, but this album really came together. It's beautifully done. This is actually their second record, called South of Reality. All right, next up, Jeff Lynne of ELO made a new record this year. And again, just another solid record. I mean, I don't think this guy can make a bad record. He's a multi-instrumentalist. He plays everything that's on here. Vocals still sound just as beautiful as when he was doing this back in the 70s. This guy's done everything from producing Tom Petty, George Harrison, being in the Traveling Wilburys, but really good stuff. If you like ELO and or you're a fan of Jeff Lynne, do check that out. Next up, Bruce Springsteen made a new record called Western Stars. I mean, this thing here I think is about the closest he's ever gotten to a country record, and I mean that in all sincerity, that, you know, he's done the folk thing, he's done the acoustic balladry thing, but this here is with a full band, and it's just beautifully done. You know, he's an amazing storyteller, and that really comes across in this record here. If you like Springsteen, you like what he does, highly recommend this album. Now the next one here, I didn't think this would ever happen. It caught me off guard. New record from the Grateful Dead. Now this is not studio, this is live. It's got 9 tracks that were recorded over the last few tours before Jerry Garcia passed away. They were road testing new material. Fortunately, he passes away and they never went into the studio and recorded any of it. So all these years later, they've gone back through those live recordings and they collected up those tracks for what was a proposed next album that they would have done. And you get to hear it here. They're done live, but you get to hear the sort of what if or what could have been if Jerry Garcia hadn't passed away. And if you like the Grateful Dead, it's just more of that. But it's beautifully done, and it's really great to hear that sort of what if. All right, next up we've got Steve Miller did a box set this year called The Vault. And while The Vault, in my opinion, had a little bit too much stuff on it, a lot of repeat, a lot of live on there, when it was distilled down here to this highlights from The Vault, I felt like this just flowed beautifully, and it was just the right amount, and each track was really great. There's a lot of alternate takes and edits, single versions, some outtakes. If you were a Steve Miller fan though, I think this is a beautiful reduction of that stuff into a single album, and would recommend that. Next up, Sting. He has an album called My Songs, and it's essentially a best of re-recorded in the studio. So, tracks from the last 30 years, he goes into the studio and he re-records these more like he's playing them live today. And so some of these are reworked, but what I like about it is that it's all recorded with modern technology today. So each of the tracks flows very well and sounds like they belong together. As opposed to, sometimes when you're listening to a greatest hits record and you clearly hear when something sounds like it was recorded in the 80s versus the 90s and or presently. So this here, as I think, has a beautiful flow to it, and is some reworkings of those classic songs. But again, it's all Sting, so do check that out. Another guy that hadn't made a record in a long time, former engineer of Pink Floyd, Alan Parsons, is back with this album called The Secret. And just as good as the stuff he used to do with Alan Parsons Project. He's got a lot of great guests on here. Jason Mars sings a song on here that was video was done for. This guy's, I just saw him live, and he's still going great, has an amazing voice still, and would recommend checking this out if you're a fan of Alan Parsons projects and or his solo material. All right, Bryan Adams is back, and this time it's a return to form. He made an album a few years back with Jeff Lynne, and I love Jeff Lynne, as I just said, but that album was more like a Dylan-sounding record or a Tom Petty record. It was kind of straight-ahead rock with some rockabilly tone to it. Just not something that Bryan Adams is known for. And this record here gets him back to what he was, sounding like in the 80s. So if you like Bryan Adams, as a return to form here, you can check this out. He does a great duet with Jennifer Lopez on it, track number 2, that I think is really good. All right, another band. There's a lot of these this year that I didn't think were going to happen, but you get a new album from Angel. Great 70s rock band, a little bit of a prog rock influence to them. They were signed to Casablanca, which was also Kiss's label. Kiss, the band that wore all black. Well, Angel was the band that wore all white. They were a boy band wearing matching outfits before boy bands existed. But this album's really great. It's a little different than the stuff they did in the 70s. But if you like what Punky Meadows, their lead guitar player, has been doing recently, if you like his most recent solo record, it's more of that. But I wasn't expecting to like it as much as I did. I popped this in. I must have kept this in for a week. It was so good. Check that out. All right, next up, Keith Richards did a re-release of Talk Is Cheap, his 1987 solo record. And while this is remastered, and it's great for that, and it's got this cool packaging, book-like style, it's what's really great about this is the bonus disc that it comes with 6 takes or 6 songs from a jam session that were done. They were jamming on some blues songs and stuff, and you get that. So you're getting some extra material here from Keith Richards, and anything we can get from Keith Richards or the Rolling Stones, in my opinion, is totally worth it. So if you're a fan of that, that's some good stuff to check out. All right, Mike and the Mechanics are back. Mike Rutherford, the lead guitar player in Genesis and his band, he's got some new singers, so he went back and he re-recorded a few of the hits with some other stuff to, again, kind of like Sting's album, to play it all in the present-day technology where it sounds the same and has a really good flow to it. But what's also really good is there's a bonus disc in this with 6 acoustic songs that I really like. And, while the main album is worth it there, that bonus disc is really good. Okay, next up, we've got the great Dream Theater, prog metal band. Started in the late 80s, still going strong. Their last album was a concept record and a little out of their wheelhouse, in my opinion. Not what they're exactly known for, but this, in my opinion, is a return to form. Very classic Dream Theater sounding. The songs are not as long. They're really straight to the point. They're much shorter than previous, but just really good stuff. I highly recommend it. It's called Distance Over Time. Do check that out. All right, Sammy Hagar made an album with his group, The Circle. They've been touring out there for, I think, about 5 years. I didn't think they would ever make an album. I figured they were just going to be a live group, but here they did make one. This is very reminiscent of Sammy Hagar's band Montrose from the 70s with some good straight-ahead rocking, and they even recycle some Montrose riffs in here. They do it on purpose, though. They know they're doing this with that intention for a throwback. So you've got Sammy Hagar on lead vocals and guitar. You've got Michael Anthony from Van Halen On bass and background vocals, you've got Jason Bonham, son of John Bonham from Led Zeppelin on drums, so just a madman on the drums. And then you got Vic Johnson, longtime guitar player with Sammy Hagar and the Wabaritas, and he can just shred. So you put all these guys together, it's a really great record. Definitely worth checking out. Next up, we got Whitesnake. Whitesnake, Flesh and Blood. This album here was delayed for a long time and then was intended to come out in 2018, but held back for about 6 months, and then ultimately came out in 2019, and well worth the wait. This is the first album with Joel Hoekstra on lead guitar, joining up with Reb Beach on lead guitar. And Joel Hoekstra comes from Night Ranger, Reb Beach from Winger. He's got a killer backing band. David Coverdale has always been known for having really amazing musicians back him up, and this is no difference than that. And this is a really good blues rock. If you like the stuff from '87, Slide It In, Slip of the Tongue, more of that stuff here. Each of the songs on this album I felt stood out in classic Whitesnake fashion, and a really great album, best that they've done in a long time. All right, next up is LA Guns, a hair metal band from the late 80s. This album here, I was shocked at how great this was. If you're a fan of that period, this album is way better than any right that it has to be. It does have Phil Lewis, original singer, and Tracy Gunn's original guitar player back in the lineup together. So I'm sure that has something to do with it here, but it's this gritty, like their 1987 debut, and then each song on here was just a really standout, distinct number that stuck in my head. And as I went from each track to each track, they were really good but really different. And so if you like that stuff from the 80s, I recommend that. Next up, we've got a supergroup of sorts. We've got the Hollywood Vampires and their album Rise. This is their second album. Their first one was all covers, but this one here is original material with only a couple covers. This has Alice Cooper on lead vocals. It's got Joe Perry of Aerosmith on lead guitar, but it's also got Johnny Depp, the actor, playing guitar. And don't let that fool you. Johnny Depp did come from the 80s hair metal scene. He was from a band called Rock City Angels, played lead guitar with them, wrote with them, but left before they recorded their first album. They do have an album. Some of Joe Perry's stuff is on, Johnny Depp's material is on there, so do check that out. But this is a really great record. You put those three guys together and you get a really solid sounding record. Next up, we've got Tom Kiefer from Cinderella doing his new album, Rise. First one in 5 years. If you liked Cinderella, the bluesy rock metal sound that he did from the late 80s, this guy was the lead singer, lead guitar player, played the piano, wrote most all the numbers, and he's doing it here. He's just really bringing it. His vocals are still right on par. He was known for his vocals and his lead guitar playing, the slide guitar that he would do, but it's a really great album. If you like Cinderella from the 80s, do check that out. All right, next up we have Down and Out. This is Joe Elliott of Def Leppard, a side project that he does. First two albums were all cover songs of Mott the Hoople numbers. He's a big fan of the glam rock era with Mott the Hoople and other bands like that. And he put together a backing group that was a group called the Choir Boys. In the late 80s, early 90s, here in America, they were known as the London Choir Boys. Had an album called Little Bit of What You Fancy, had a song called 7 O'Clock that was all over MTV. Really great blues rock in the vein of the 70s glam rock, Mott the Hoople era stuff. But these are all original written songs. These are not covers on here. So well worth checking out if you want some Joe Elliott material while you're waiting on the next Def Leppard record. Next up, we've got the Cranberries. Unfortunately, Dolores O'Riordan passed away, the lead singer. Such amazing, beautiful vocals from her. They were working on the album, demoing it when she passed away, and they were able to extract those vocals and build the album around it. And it's just a really solid record, not just because it's a good tribute to her, but it's a good, strong record in its own right. And if you like the Cranberries, it's more of that. I do recommend checking it out. Next up, we've got Bad Religion, and Bad Religion is a Southern rock, not Southern rock, but Southern California punk band. and they haven't done anything in quite some time, and this is back out, and I think it's probably due to the political environment, because they've always been known for sort of rallying against what's going on, and there's more of that on here. But if you liked them, back from the early 80s and 90s, do check that out. Next up, we've got William Duvall. William Duvall is the current lead singer in Alice in Chains. And I was just interested in this because I wanted to know what he sounded like on his own. What is it that he's bringing to the band, kind of a thing. This is him and an acoustic guitar doing 11 numbers. And I didn't expect much from this, but each track is really great, and it just pulled me all the way through the record. I couldn't stop listening to it. I had a really hard time getting a hold of this. Amazon, I had it pre-ordered for like 2 months, and then they canceled it, said they couldn't get it. I had to go to the website to get it. You can see that he signed it. If you order it from the website, you will get it autographed. Highly recommend it. Next up, Chris Robinson Band, the lead singer of the Black Crowes, and now the Black Crowes are back together and going to tour. I hope they make a new record, but in the meantime, if you're interested, do check out this record of his here. This one is, more southern rock and more jammy like the Grateful Dead, but with his vocals on it. It's very distinctive Chris Robinson sounding stuff and really good. Servants of the Sun is the name of that. Up next, an album again I didn't think we'd get. We had a lot of these this year. Iggy Pop, Free. Iggy Pop, this is the second time now where he has said he's made a record and he's done. And you had that with the previous record that he did with Josh Homme, said before that he was done, then he made that record, then he said he was done, now he's made this record, he said he's done again. I hope he never stops though, honestly. I just love Iggy Pop. This one, he's got jazz musicians backing him up that he's are collaborating with, really is what I should say, more than backing him up. It's a collaboration. And you wouldn't think that Iggy Pop and his sort of punk stylings would be able to merge with jazz, but he does it beautifully, and it just works. If you're an Iggy Pop fan, you're gonna like it, but I think if you're a jazz fan, I think you're gonna like it too. All right, next up is the only full live album that I've got in this collection, and it's David Byrne and his Broadway performance of American Utopia. This album is so great. I don't know what it is. I guess it's just the energy of it live, but he does Talking Heads hits, he does solo material, and with this full band and the way that they perform this stuff, there's some reworkings of some songs in here, but this is just really great, top to bottom, flows beautifully. I highly recommend it. And if you're in the New York City area, the performance is still on Broadway, and I would recommend checking it out. It's up through March, and it was extended, so do check that out if you can, or pick up the album. All right, we're down to the final three here. The number 3 best album of 2019, I believe, is this, Pink Floyd, The Later Years Highlights. This disc here is more than just a collection of stuff here. It's got unreleased live material. It's got live material like from The Delicate Sound of Thunder that was remixed. It sounds better. Momentary Lapse of Reason was remixed. It had Nick Mason, new drums by Nick Mason, and Rick Wright keyboard parts added back into it, so it's got a much more organic feel. There's tracks from that on here. They've got outtakes from the Division Bell. They got tour rehearsals from the Pulse on here. But just top to bottom, it's a great album that just flows beautifully. More than just a highlights. Do check that out. Next up is another one of those albums that, again, I didn't think we would get. It's Neil Young and Crazy Horse, Colorado. The other guitar player that was in Crazy Horse had retired a number of years back and just didn't want to do it, and Neil couldn't entice him to come out, so he tapped Nils Lofgren, who was with Crazy Horse back in the 70s. So you've got Nils from the 70s lineup of Crazy Horse back with Neil in the band, and it's just beautiful. It's just great what he brings to this lineup. The finger picking stylings that he does in here is beautiful. It's not quite as dirgy and heavy as some Crazy Horse material, but it's definitely reminiscent of the stuff from the 70s. All right, the final and what I consider to be the best album of 2019 is this, The Who. I think this album is just solid top to bottom. I really love it. So much so I've done 2 reviews of it here on my channel. I did the standard edition, and then a week later I got this one here, the Target edition, and felt the need to review those 3 extra songs that this comes with. So this one here, Target edition's got 14 tracks. It's got 4 with Pete Townsend on lead, and it's got 10 with Roger. but just great stuff. First track, this music must fade. Great Who sounding song. It's got Hero Ground Zero, beautiful song with a wonderful message in it, beautifully orchestrated. Another song called Beads on One String that I love, and probably my favorite track, Break the News. It's a folky song. You wouldn't think that the Who could do that, but they do. This album here, in my opinion, is the best thing that they've done since way back in '82 and before. The Endless Wire that they did just didn't do it for me, and this album here, in my opinion, really tops that. All right, so there you go. I hope that, from this list, maybe you saw something that you had forgotten about. Maybe you saw something you didn't even know about. Maybe you'll just learn something, found it interesting. I'm sure there's some albums that you think were probably the best of 2019 that I didn't include. Feel free to leave me comments about that. And if you did like this, again, please like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. Let me know your thoughts on this. And I hope everyone has a final 2 days of 2019, and I'm looking forward to seeing you all in 2020. Have a great one.